Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to see you. Welcome to Teachers Love We Do live session. And so the regular question here is which part of the world you are tuning from? What is your teaching role? And I hope you are so excited as I am today to have a really great discussion with our dear guest, Dr. Jane R. Shore, and walk through the visual creation story. Wow, I love this. Even the title of this webinar is it's getting me really excited. I want to see who has already joined us, and I can see Sir Jamel. And good evening to everyone. I know that in in the US, for example, it's early morning, and here it's like evening, and somewhere it's midnight. So I can see so many familiar EDU folks that have already joined us. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And there's Ludmila also, and Mahmoud is here. Thank you. Thank you. I would love to add some more details about our guest speaker, Dr. Jane R. Shore. She is a part of the founding team of a new community connected school in the US called Revolution School. Her official title is Head of Research and Innovation. And in this role, she has co-founded a professional learning community called School of Thought. Jane loves to co-design and explore answers to research questions that cross boundaries, like how might we meaningfully capture the impact of hard to measure things. Wow, this is incredible. Jane has been a researcher, a documentary filmmaker, and an illustrator. Fantastic. And I just want to add, Ludmila from Moldova, thank you for sharing. Keep tuning and keep sharing for which part of the world you're tuning from. I'm going to invite our dear guest speaker, Dr. Jane Shore. Welcome to our live stream. Thank you so much that you have joined us. I can hear you. Yeah, everything is great.
Checking in with each other, with our students, and I so appreciate being able to check in this space as well. So I wanted to tell a little bit about our origin story again, just so we can restart from the beginning. We are, I am tuning in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at East Coast of the United States, and I am part of a new high school, and in this COVID divided year, it has been of utmost importance to find ways to connect and communicate. So I am actually 3 slides ahead. I can't control the slides, Anna. So if you could advance a couple of slides. There we go. So back to the school, connecting and breaking down the walls between learning and life, which we are always doing right now. We are doing a lot of learning about technology, and we have some brave founding students, and I have an amazing team of individuals who are supporting this work in Philadelphia. I am a researcher. For the last 20 years or so, I've been doing research around the world in literacy and language acquisition. And the exciting moment that we're in has allowed that to come to the thinking behind our founding of a new school. And in doing so, there has been a question that was inspired, which is the next slide, around how do we get the kinds of things that we were engaging in the research level to practice on the ground. So that inspired this whole visual story of recognizing that visuals enable us to connect to messages that can be really complicated. Visuals also enable us to connect to feelings, and in ways that provide space for vulnerability when it's hard to tap into that space. So the next slide kind of tells a little bit about the challenge that I started with in my role in this founding team, is that a lot of the research in the field doesn't prioritize the people that are reading it. And we really want to look at accessibility and interpretability and usability. And so often visuals are an afterthought. And I think that's different this year. I think that we've really tapped into the idea that visuals can help us through so many things, including a global health crisis, but also as we look to education, bringing visuals into this explanations of explaining complicated things help the learning become more durable. And that's something that I wanted to talk about a little bit today. So moving on to the next slide, really believe in the power of using visuals from start to finish, from the beginning of an exploration of a question, from the beginning of learning, from the beginning of touching base with people, and everywhere in between. So I am in this very lucky space of producing visuals that are shared for ways that and in ways that allow us to convey message and connect with others. And I found this article, the next article, really explanatory with regard to the way in which I find research and messages that are big and complicated more easy to tell with visuals. So the next slide is an example of what it usually looks like when you're reading all kinds of complicated text. This is a study about the GDP in Greece and the changes in the economy, and this is what research studies normally look like, and I don't know why, because they're very inaccessible. The next slide is the visual that explains that, which I still think is really hard to read. The next slide is a visual of the Greek GDP per capita, telling the story of the fact that we talk about things taking a dive when things go up and go down, and the idea of being able to capture a story with a visual really was the impetus for a lot of the work that I have had the opportunity to do in creating visuals. So what I want to walk through, Anna, and I can't hear you, but please, I'm going to look to see if the various devices I have open allow me to answer and interact in whatever way I can. But the next slide kind of starts walking through the visual story of the work that I've been able to do. So at the start of the pandemic, a friend of mine and I were sitting in her living room, imagining ways that we could connect with others. And we started thinking about the power of visuals and storytelling and the work in which we can begin to tie the two together. And so, and that is an article that's linked right there in a space called Method Space, which is a space for individuals to share mostly qualitative methods of telling stories and describing research. But we wrote an article together on the power of visuals and storytelling. And it was sort of the start of all of these visuals coming out. And so the next slide also explains the idea. So this is a visual of me and my two kids who had just got off to school. But the idea that I believe is that hand-drawn visualization especially allows you to look at an illustration and not forget that it was designed by a human. Whereas sometimes for me, computer programmed graphics enable you to forget that a human played the role, and a human has biases and their own interpretation. So when I convey messages through visuals, I really think of it the fact that in every single stage of telling a story, you are a human that's making choices about that story, and that informs how you interpret it. So it's really important for people not to lose sight of the fact that any message that we're getting in text, in graph, in when we read our news stories, there's a human that's making decisions, and hand-drawn visuals really tie that human element to the storytelling. So I think that is an inspiration for me to do these hand-drawn visuals. The next slide is kind of the way that I'll talk today about the why, the how, and the what. And so one of the things that a lot of times when we're trying to enter into this kind of, it's almost like another language, the idea of being inclusive and connected to others across languages. What I think is really lovely, I mean, for someone like Anna who speaks so many languages, and I imagine the people that are here tuning in, I saw people from Bangladesh. I mean, the fact is, I get to speak English in this space, and I was able to do that, just by virtue of where I grew up. But visuals enable others and enable me to connect with a lot of people across languages and across, when we work in communities that have different ways of connecting and communicating, visuals are a way that we can all enable us to enter conversations. So the why, I'm going to talk a little bit about, and then the how, having to do with, engaging people in decision making, and I'll show some visuals about that. And then what, and I'll share a little bit about what we've done in Philadelphia in our school and through our online community, which I hope others can join also. It's open to all. So that's what I'm going to do today. And this is sort of like the circle of visualization that was created for that Imagining Forward article. So the next slide, COVID hit in 2020, inspiration for, and before 2020, but it really shut us down. And it's an inspiration for a lot of what we've done. So the next slide talks about this, the model that I'll share with you today that was prepared for Anna here, and kind of thinking about the ways in which we're engaging in visuals. And I realized there was an acronym that could be shared that describes what the visuals have done for me in a model, which I realized that visuals allow us for inclusivity, durability, emotion, and action. And I need to take a drink of water because I'm about to cough. So, and I'll explain each of these. So the next slide is the description of the inclusivity piece. This idea of connection, this idea of bringing us together. This was a slide in early 2020 when we were really searching for ways to allow us to be connected. And in so many ways, there are stories that can be told through visuals that enable words that allow us to individualize, but also allow us to connect. So the next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this idea. So inclusivity, meaning that we're all connected. We see the world and our world and my world. One of the things that we've done in our space is take a daily pause and use visuals to help practice being calm in crisis. And so the next slide, I am sharing is related to something that we started doing every morning at our school, using visuals to tap into in this moment I am. And the students were asked and encouraged to share in the chat. These were words that were given to them, but the visuals allowed them to say, you know, I'm still waiting to transform. I'm still in that caterpillar. I'm in a cocoon. I'm feeling free. It enabled us to tie feelings to things that were separate from each individual, that allowed them to be more vulnerable and to explain how they were doing in the moment so that we could connect. The next is another one where this is inspired by an artist named Keely Shaw also, who's wonderful. But this idea, visuals, anybody can create these. This is not, these are just squiggles in this, but it's tapping into how your brain is doing today. And this idea of being swirly twirly or on high alert or hopeful, sometimes the visuals allow us to access the words in ways that we might not otherwise be able to do. The next slide is taken. This is not something that I created, but I think that it's what I want to show is, and part of what I feel very honored to be able to do is say, I'm creating visuals and so are others. And here is an example that I really liked. It's just sort of the visuals that allow you to see what are you ready to do? Using these visuals as a way to check in with others and recognize the importance of our social emotional well-being, especially right now, is something that, we have lots of examples of, and we were able to bring that into our classroom in Philadelphia for our students this year, and also share with others. I know that there were other teachers in our online community who were able to use these in all kinds of places. We've connected with them, and they've leaned into our classroom from Dubai and from California and from London And, all of these educators doing amazing work across the world. And these visuals were able to connect us and tap into those places that maybe words could not. Is it? So this idea of inclusivity, I'm just gonna, this is not mine. This is one of my favorite artists who does visual work. Her name is Mona Shalabi, and she works for The Guardian and does visualization of data. But this idea of tapping into inclusivity, she did this visual on average voter wait times. Here in Philadelphia, we have an election coming up, and to be able to look at the data and understand what it is through this visual provides just such an impactful story. The next slide is some of the work that I started to also think about with regard to the brain science behind it, because we take in information through our brains in visual ways more than any other of our senses, if we can see. So visual information is really important, and it allows us to hold the messages in many different places in our brains. And then the next slide kind of talks about some of the work. So the second piece of IDEA is durability. And so the next one. So I just was looking at a lot of these things. We use this all, everywhere. We know that when we see visuals, something like slippery when wet, these pictures, if you look at these two, which one is the one that's more likely to stick with you? And it turns out that after 3 days, the visual sticks with you 65% more of the time than the text only. So there's something called a picture superiority effect, and you think about what that means for learning in a classroom. If you are looking at a visual or a picture, you're able to remember things longer. It's more durable. It's more sustainable. It's stickier than words alone. So some of the things that we've been able to do are on the next slide. And this is just more of the same. If you look at words on a page versus visuals, you are more likely to read text if it started with a visual, if it has a visual. So if you have just words alone, people will read only about 62 words on a page, but they will read about a piece of content increased by 80% if you have a visual. So if you think about that translation for students, it's not only stickier, but they're going to read more. They're going to be more enticed to read in a school setting. And that also includes, if you're in communications or in places where you're trying to share stories, even in journalism, there are 94% more views if you have visuals. So all of these pieces of research inform the reasoning behind the use of visuals. And then the next slide. Anna, you're doing so much. Thank you. So for example, one of the things that we've been really thinking about in places across the world is the purpose of school. This visual I had the opportunity to do with my friend Erin Robb, who graduated from Stanford University in California, and her work has been about the purpose of school. And so this is really inspired by a lot of her work, but this visual represents the idea that so much of what we do is focused on what. COVID really had us stuck in what are we going to do in the classroom? What's going to happen? What's urgent? And it's so important to understand that. But the layer that begins with why are we educating? How might we come together to focus on the knowledge and the goals and the equity, democracy, curiosity? That's the center of the why. And so the visual was really meant to represent that we want to try to focus our attention on why, and then get to how, and how is sort of those methodologies being student-centered, being project-based. Some people believe in Montessori and inquiry-based, direct instruction. That's the next layer. And the final layer is the what. All of them are important. So the final layer is the what. We use, we look at ed technology, we look at certain curricula, we look at math interventions, we look at lesson plans. Those are really important. But if we don't start with the why, we can lose sight of it. And so the purpose of these visuals and this idea is to really represent these stories in durable and inclusive ways. There's this idea called neural coupling. The research behind the fact that when you tell a story, the individual who's hearing a story begins to feel the feelings of that story as you felt them in ways that if you just provide text, they don't connect in the same way. So there's a mirroring that's really interesting. And with visuals, that mirroring is amplified. So you can begin to tap into places in the brain that release chemicals like dopamine. My goodness. Dopamine, cortisol, oxytocin, all those feel-good chemicals. I'm going to pause and go to the next slide. Okay. Obviously, the brain is making me cough.
Yeah, it's so sad that Jane can't hear me today. I want to add some comments, but she can't
emotion,
hear me. So sorry.
Some of the visuals that we've created in the United States were around anti-racism. And a question that individuals many times had were things like, how can I enter the conversation? So one of the visuals that I had created was, there is a spectrum and all of us can enter in different places. A spectrum from expression of your belief to participation, writing letters, writing down and posting on social media, to activism, engaging in protests, to leadership and amplification, which requires a higher commitment. So the visuals that were created were around this emotion piece. When you can convey messages that can really tie to people's emotions. And it ties to the last piece of the IDEA. But that idea, so this was another visual that was created. It looks a little cut off here, but I can share it out. But the visuals for me were also used during events that we had where we gathered people from around the world to come into our school and Zoom into our school. And some of the ways that we welcomed individuals were through visuals, both of the topic that we were covering and also creating visuals of the individuals who were joining. So we welcome people into our space through visual connections. And then the next one. So for example, and we could just flip through these are just some of the individuals. So, just welcoming people into our space. There's something really connected for me about creating visuals of people who joined our space from a hurricane in Georgia, where in the United States, where the power went off. Rohit Bora joined us and zoomed in through his phone in his car because all the electricity went out for like 2 million people, but he was still able to connect in our school. And visuals just a way to welcome him in. And the next one, these are the individuals. Shad Manuddin is an individual who joined us. I just want to go through. He used to work for the Philadelphia Citizen and is a community builder, able to join us from any place he was in the world. So he was able to connect with our students and be welcomed into our space. And the next one is Alex Brunson, another community member that joins us in the School of Thought, who is a musician and a poet. And he was able to join our space, and the visuals just welcomed him in and were a way for us to connect with him. And my friend Melissa DePino, who started an anti-racism organization in the United States, and her hashtag is Show Up. So this idea, but the visuals were just a way for us to remind ourselves of how thankful we were and grateful we were for others, and also to bring them into our space. So all about welcoming others. We can just flip through that one. And so finally, the last part is the idea of taking action through visuals. And so we did a lot of different visualization and created this particular visual to talk about visualization with purpose. So looking at the idea that we want to think when we create visuals, are we trying to connect with others? Are we trying to solve problems, make decisions, generate ideas? And there are all kinds of different ways we can do that, but grounding our visuals in purpose. And sometimes it's just to relieve tension or engage in some mindfulness for me when I create visuals. But in the end, this is the way in which we were using them. We were really connecting with others and generating ideas and using them for learning or making decisions. And so, and we can go through that one. Sorry. And this is we created more visuals, and we were looking at the ways in which visuals can be used to convey messages. And sometimes they're story driven, sometimes they're evidence based or data driven or theoretical. But in the end, the idea is conveying messages that can be inclusive, durable, convey emotion, and lead to action. And so the next one, I just want to share some of the visuals that I created just for fun.
Wow.
And this was one of the ones that I created right in the beginning of the pandemic. There's less clarity in our ability to connect with one another. And so this was just a visual representation of that idea, to begin to think about clarity and to begin to think about like how many individuals really tip us over the point in which we're no longer able to communicate well. So virtual meetings they're now a part of what we're doing in so many really productive spaces. But sometimes when you want to connect with one-on-one with somebody, it's harder to communicate when they're huge virtual meetings. And I think the next one's just a silly one. Is it going?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, this one is around caffeine content and the idea of like a spiky, tired eye. So if you look at something like this, you can have a greater sense of the message really quickly. And I myself don't drink coffee, but I know there are a lot of people who do. But that sense that you can convey a message and a story in such powerful, beautiful ways with visuals. And the next one. This one also, I looked at data from the US Department of Agriculture, and I was just looking at how interesting it was that over time, our consumption of milk has gone down in the United States and our consumption of cheese has gone up, but which I totally believe in because I don't really like milk, but I love cheese. So sometimes you look at data, and my belief is if you can't see yourself in the data, you kind of want to start to question it. But this idea of being able to convey messages through visuals allows you to not have to look at that data. You can look at that data set that I looked at, but you can look at the story that can be told by the visuals. And that hashtag less milk. This was something done by Mona Chalabi, which I think is just wonderful, and ties into this idea of taking action. If you stretch your arm out when you are about 6 feet away from someone, their face fits right into the center. And that is a way for you to understand how far, at least in the beginning, individuals were told to sort of keep a distance, but the way in which a visual can convey that story is so much more powerful than we'd be able to even tell. You look at that picture and you can tell what you're supposed to do.
Wow.
So this is in sum. I think that, visuals increase participation and access to messages. They lead to action. There's a science behind them. I believe visuals are language, and I would love to share visuals with all of you. And, there are different ways you can do it. I think I realize this is the next slide, I think, should have some contact information. And I know, Anna, you've shared others. We have a blog, and I would love people to tap into that, to schoolofthought.substack.com. And also, I have been creating short videos with visuals that convey the messages from the blog. But there are various ways to get in touch, and I would love it if you wanted to. One of the things that I also want to say out loud is I appreciate being in this space. Hopefully, if we can do this sometime again, I will learn the technology, and we'll set ourselves up. But I would love to walk through. This was more of a how and what we've done, and the visual creation story. But even to do a little workshop on how would be really fun to follow up.
And I am always interested in helping people tell their stories. Part of the motivation for creating visuals for me was to be able to explain things, both for me to help me understand. When I get into creating a visual, it helps me understand, but to be able to explain things and to connect with others. And I think that's what we're doing right here in this platform. And I appreciate that people were able to stick with us and to hear the ideas. And I hope that we can continue to connect and join together on other platforms. And I share visuals all the time, and I'm hoping that others can use them in their spaces too, to connect with others or explain complicated ideas.
Yeah, wow, amazing. My heart is overflowing with gratitude to you, Jane. You were struggling so much today, but thank you for sharing. It was incredible. I absolutely love all the creations you've shared. They are amazing. That's something that we need these days. And I know that you support your PLN, your colleagues, and that's incredible. Thank you so much. Great session. Thank you, Nirmal. Thank you, Renita. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. And I think that's it for today. Thanks again for being so super supportive. And thank you so much, Dr. Danger. You are incredible, amazing, and keep inspiring us, because from the very first slide of yours, I was like, wow. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and stay safe for sure. And yeah, stay tuned. See you next time. Bye. Everyone.
Thank you.